it is unfortunate for people who just preceded him that the Rambam came along when he did. In fact, the first big Aristotelian thinker, the guy who really shifts the paradigm, if you like, he read Saadia Gaon, who he thought was okay, got a few points wrong. He read Ibn Gvirol, who he thought was total dribble. This guy is Avraham ibn Dawood, who lives just prior to the Rambam. Ibn Dawood is far more concerned. I mean, if it hadn't been for the Rambam, we would be talking about Ibn Dawood in terms of philosophy. The Rambam came along and just completely blitzed his career. Ibn Dawood is talking primarily about Aristotle, and he brings in some interesting ideas. For him, all of philosophy, and this, you can take this as you like, all of philosophy is evolving into Judaism. Judaism is primarily an intellectual apprehension of God. It is the highest possible form of philosophy. Now, you know that Aristotle, famously, I need to spend 1 second on Aristotle because it's difficult to talk about Ibn Dawood and the Rambam and the Rambam about Aristotle, but Ibn Dawood is looking at Aristotle's 4 causes. Everybody familiar with the idea of Aristotle's 4 causes? Everything that exists has 4 causes. Yep.
Is that the fire, earth, water?
No, they're the 4 elements. That's actually much older. But Aristotle has 4 causes for anything that exists, which is the material, the formal, the efficient, and the final or teleological. I mean, to give an example, this table has a material cause, which is, wood and metal. It has a formal cause, which is
Put things on?
that it's shaped like a table. It has an efficient cause, which means that somebody came along and actually stuck these bits together and made it into a table. And it has a teleological cause, which means that they did that so that it would be an article that people could place objects upon. It could function as a table. It's the third of those causes, the efficient causes, that interests Aristotelian thinkers theologically in the Middle Ages. Because Ibn Dawood comes to this realization that many other Aristotelian thinkers of a theological nature come to, and he realizes that there is a way to prove the existence of God. You know that right throughout Jewish thinking, Jews, especially in Chazal and so on, have never been concerned with proving the existence of God. Maybe I'll just wait for a second. Come here. If you are talking about a people that came out of a theosophical past, a theohistorical past in which miracles happen constantly, and see themselves, in a sense, their very presence in the world as a manifestation of the divine, you're not going to be talking about the need for proofs of the existence of a creator. But by the Middle Ages, people are starting to apply their intellect to, are there ways in which we can prove the existence of God? And of course, Ibn Dawood is one of those who takes this efficient cause of Aristotle and turns it into a proof of God. Everything in the world must have a cause, and I can go all the way back. Initially, there must have been a primary cause for everything in the universe. That causa prima is God. There's a big intellectual argument that was bandied about. Aquinas brings it up. Many philosophers of the Middle Ages bring it. Ibn Dawood is the first to bring it into Jewish thinking. But as I said, Ibn Dawood and his emphasis on seeing Judaism as an intellectual project is blitzed by the Rambam. Now, I need to spend a minute on the Rambam. Most people, if they can name one Jewish philosopher, generally name the Rambam. It's difficult for us to understand, and I say this earnestly the more you look at it, it's difficult for us to understand how a human being gets to be the Rambam. You're talking about a guy that, 1148 is the Almohad invasion of Spain that throws the whole of the, Golden Age of Spain and all these hundreds of Jewish communities into absolute chaos. 1148, the year of this Almohad invasion, is the year of the bar mitzvah of the Rambam. Everything he achieves, he's going to do, spending most of his life on the run. His father, of course, was the Dayan of Cordova. His father, Maimon, who was a student of Yosef ibn Migash, who was a student of the Rif, and so on. This is a huge heritage, but he's doing this on the run. He becomes the greatest, obviously, Torah scholar, not only of his own generation, but of several generations on either side, writes the greatest code of halakha of the Middle Ages, becomes the greatest physician in the world, the same guy, fought over for an employer by Saladin and Richard I, and if that wasn't enough to be the greatest rabbi in the world and the greatest doctor in the world, also becomes the greatest philosopher in the world. The Christian church is not in the habit of paying compliments to Jewish philosophers living in Muslim countries. But they acknowledge the Rambam. Well, that's later. You're right, but that's later. We also burn his books, don't forget. Don't worry about it. Yeah. 1 second, yeah. I just need to get onto the Rambam.
Well, during this period, how were the Jews treated by the Muslims? How do the Muslims treat Jews?
Dude, if you were living in the Cordovan Caliphate under Abdul Rahman II in the 10th century, you would love it. Don't forget that while we were being absolutely degraded, tortured, massacred, and burnt constantly every Tuesday and Friday in Christian Europe, we were having a good, not always, I'm not trying to paint this golden picture of the Islamic world, but generally in the Middle Ages we fared much better in Islamic countries than we did in Christian countries. As I said a few weeks ago in Jerusalem, you know, I'm tired of people coming to me and saying, oh, Barack Obama's a Muslim. I'm not here to comment, of course, on the American election or the fitness of him as a candidate, but I did say to people, you shouldn't really worry that he might be a Muslim. You should be deeply worried that he is a Christian. We have suffered much more at the hands of Christianity. But, you know, I've got to realize I'm actually standing in Jerusalem at the moment. I'm in New York, and I've got to be very careful about this. The Rambam, it's hard. I mean, you're all under no misapprehension that we could spend several hours, if not years, talking about the Rambam. The Rambam loved philosophy, loved Aristotle. For him, I mean, he writes this big book, Moreh Nevuchim. In 1 second, I'll give you 1 second. Moreh Nevuchim, the guide for the perplexed, which Rambam writes towards the end of his career, really as a response to only 1 or 2 students who'd asked him a couple of philosophical questions, because for the Rambam, philosophy was not for the masses, it was for the intellectual elite. And the Guide for the Perplexed is probably the second best title in the whole of Jewish literature, certainly in the whole of Jewish philosophy. It's a fantastic title. My favorite title is actually a philosophical work written in the 10th century by an obscure Jewish philosopher living in Egypt called the Book of Urine, by a guy called Yitzhak Yisraeli, who actually drank his own urine but lived to the age of 100. The Rambam, you can imagine the Rambam finishing these long, long days that he has and helping people, you know, medically, and he was a communal leader and he was a great rabbi, and finally when everybody's buggered off, everybody's gone home, at 2 in the morning, he finally gets in his room, he lights the candle, he sits down and he opens Aristotle.